Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to return to the Netherlands once again. We're going to visit Amsterdam this time, which I think is my first visit to that city if I remember correctly. But we're going to taste a beer from a very new brewery there called Oedipus, and this guy is called Tai, and essentially it's a Belgian Tripel beer which is designed specifically to go with Asian food, if you like. Tai in particular is obviously the one they had in mind when they brewed this beer particularly. So anyway, as is usual with my beer reviews then, I'll take you through a very kind of brief history of the company. It will only be a minute or two because it is a very new brewery, but if you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. The brewery website's in the description for you below, along with a link to my other reviews that hopefully I can add from Oedipus in the very near future, because this is the very first time that I'm trying anything from these guys. So anyway, to tell you about Oedipus. Oedipus was founded in 2011 in Amsterdam by a team of 4 friends, Alex, Paul, Rick and Sander, and they said that they began brewing beer because they found themselves spending most of their time socialising through drinking beer, and so they decided to brew beer for themselves to kind of stop their habit costing them a lot of money essentially. So they say that the whole aim of their brewery is to create tasty beers, and they use the best ingredients to do so, and I've heard very good things about this brewery from Dutch people, so I'm quite excited to try this beer, I have to admit. But there's an interesting story behind the move for a brew pub here. In October 2013 they moved to their new space Investordock, which was intended to be the site of their brew pub. However, after they received a permit to convert the site, they actually received news from a contact that said there was an old contract in place from 2008 or something like that, that meant that this Investordock site that they'd secured could not be used as a food and beer retail place. So they managed to secure a new site at the old Stork area in Amsterdam Noord, where they actually expanded their brewing capacity and established a brand new microbrewery. So they'd actually conducted a major crowdfunding exercise, if you like, to fund this move to Investordock, but they're now searching for a new venue to use that money that they've made and create a new brew pub. So hopefully in the fairly near future in Amsterdam you will actually see an Oedipus brew pub at some point there, but they host a whole load of tasting events and things like that. It's a very active brewery, so as I say, keep an eye on the website. Just to tell you a little bit about the name behind this brewery. Partly the brewery is named after the Greek god Oedipus, who unwittingly killed his father and then married his mother, and apparently he did not know his true identity, and thus he followed the life full of wrong choices, and apparently even his best qualities could not save him from the actions that defied the laws of the gods and men. And many say that Oedipus embodied 2 enduring themes of Greek mythology: the flawed nature of humanity and the individual's helplessness against destiny. So I do wonder if that's a bit of a reference to the fact that these guys were maybe destined to brew beer after making wrong choices in their life about what jobs to do and things like that. Perhaps it is, but maybe I'm just speculating. But anyway, that's a little bit of a history of the brewery for you there, but we'll get on to the tasting of this beer now. So to tell you about the other beers quickly before we do that you can get from these guys, they've got a small core range. So there's Gaia, which is an IPA, there's Mama, which is a pale ale, Manenfielde, which is a saison beer, Panty, which is a stout, Tai, which is this guy here, a spiced Tripel, Ruber and Robbie, which is a porter, Slow-Mo, which is another saison, and Dodo, which is a California common, and you do get a few collaboration beers and limited editions and things like that as well. But to tell you about this beer specifically, this guy is an 8% Tripel beer, and it contains galanga root, orange peel, coriander seeds, lemongrass and chili powder. So like I said, it's a specially spiced Tripel beer, if you like, that's designed especially to go with Asian food essentially. So as you can see down there, you can see this sort of little splash that you have here. I'm not sure how well you can see that. If I bring the light up, maybe you can catch it just a little bit better, but this kind of little splashy thing here is the Oedipus symbol. I think you can see it better on that level of light, but there's just a plain bottle cap on this guy. It has a little bit in the back in Dutch, and it just basically tells you brewed with water, malts, hops, and the different ingredients that I just listed for you. They are all in Dutch, and it's 8%, 33 centilitre bottle, and you can see the kind of crazy elephant on the front of it there. Just put the light down so you can see that properly. A bit of a problem with the light in my house when you film at night obviously, but without further ado, let's get this guy open and we'll get on with the tasting. So an 8% specially spiced Tripel beer, so here we go. Looks really nice, pouring a typical kind of bready golden straw colour that you expect from a sort of Tripel style beer, and a nice big head as you would also expect from it. So we'll just bring up the light and let you have a little quick look at the colour of this beer. There's quite a bit of sediment in this, but that was noticeable in the bottle before I poured it out. So there's a finger and maybe a finger and a half of a very frothy, very white head. Not even creamy coloured, definitely white. As you can see, the beer's not transparent at all, and it's a very kind of bright yellowy amber colour, that one, a very bright yellow, maybe a slight orange tint to it, but there's a good bit of sediment floating around in there, as you can see, and there's a little bit of carbonation just going up towards the bottom of the head. You can't really see it that well in this light, but there is a little bit there, and there's some bigger bubbles just kind of sticking towards the side of the glass as well, but quite a bit of sediment in this one, which can be typical of Belgian beers if you've cellared them for a little while. I've had this beer about 8 months or something like that. But in terms of the aroma, you've got the typical Belgian-y elements that you would expect from this beer. So you've got a nice bready, yeasty malt base in here, and you can actually really smell the lemongrass and a little bit of that spice in there. There's a bit of an unusual smell to it as well, which I'm guessing is probably the galanga root kind of coming out. Because orange peel, coriander seeds, you get a very typical aroma from these guys. Lemongrass and chili powder, you know exactly what it smells like. But there's an unusual, kind of unusual sort of herbally element that galanga root must be giving out. So you've got a nice herbal and quite spicy aroma coming off this guy, and that's on top of the big bready yeast. But the nose generally is quite mild in this one. If you just sit it still like this, you can pick up a little bit of the bread and a little bit of the kind of spice on this one. But if you sugar it up a little bit, then you start to get a little bit more of the lemongrass and things like that coming out. You start to get a little bit of a grassy hop and a little bit of citrusy fruit as well. Interestingly, it didn't actually say what hops and malts and stuff they used in this beer on the website as far as I could see. But it smells very nice. It's basically, you get a good, if you sugar it up a bit, you do get a good whiff of the lemongrass actually. Actually becomes very pungent, but it's a very mild aroma beer this, which is in a way typical of some Belgian beers. Usually it's a big bready, yeasty aroma that you get from them, but not much else. Everything else is very mild, but this guy, even in its bread and its kind of bready aroma and stuff like that, is very subtle. But the Dutch beer is excellent. I should point that out before I taste it. The Dutch beer is often overshadowed by the Belgian beer, but there really is, it's just because it's hard to get, but there really is some excellent Dutch beer out there for you to try. But without further ado, let's have a taste of the Thai Spice Tripel from Oedipus in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Slange. Now that's really nice actually. On first taste, it is a very, very mild beer, but it's really nicely done. Yeah, it's got a very mild bready flavour, this one, and it's I can see why it goes with those sort of more mild and sort of Asian Oriental food flavours actually, particularly Thai food. You can see why it would go well with that, because Thai is a very mild but very rich flavoured beer, and that's exactly what this, or flavoured food rather, and that's exactly what this beer is. Very mild, but at the same time very rich actually. So yeah, around the edges of the tongue you get a nice, very light, grassy hop, but it comes off as more of a lemongrass, as you would expect with the additions they've made to this beer. It is very mild, but it's just got a nice level of moisture. The kind of dryness in the mouthfeel builds a little bit as you've had a few sips of it, I would say. But yeah, you've got a nice big bready malt base in there. It is really yeasty actually, but it just blankets the tongue very nicely. As the flavour progresses, right in the middle of the tongue you get a little bit of spice, which is typical of the kind of coriander seeds. You can actually really taste that coriander spice in there, just mixing in with these nice bready and yeasty elements. The chili powder, I think, isn't too apparent in this one. It's very mild and mixed in with that bready malt base, so you can detect all these elements here. You get a little dryness in the middle of the tongue, and perhaps that's where the bulk of the coriander and the chili powder flavours are mixing together, but it's a really nice blend of flavours, this beer. Yeah, towards the front of the tongue you really get a nice, you get a very kind of big, slightly juicy, grassy and lemony citrus flavour from the hops there, but at the same time it is kind of coming out in the flavour of Asian lemongrass. You get a really juicy, very moist lemongrassy flavour that just goes right around the edge of the tongue. But as you move more into the aftertaste, it starts to dry out a little bit, and that's when you get a bit more of a kind of floral and aromatic-y flavour just kind of coming around the edge of the tongue. When the tongue is still wet, you get this really beautiful lemongrass flavour in there. The flavours in this beer are beautifully blended together. I'll have to compliment Oedipus on that. Yeah, you can detect a little bit of chili powder as your mouth kind of adjusts to the beer. You just get a little bit of it, particularly in the swallow of the beer. But the coriander spice and the sort of chili powder spice that you would obviously expect is right in the middle of the tongue. You just get a little bit of dryness in there, and it's kind of right in the middle of that big bready, sort of bready pale malt and slightly sweet yeasty character. The yeast in this one is actually really sweet, a really kind of mild sweet, and it complements the kind of lemongrass flavours really well before they build into those nice aromatic and floral flavours as well. The flavours in this beer blend together really, really well, I have to admit. It's beautifully done. But yeah, it's a beer that's perfectly designed for Asian food. If you try this for yourself, you'll see exactly what I mean. This one's even better than the likes of Kin Kin and Dim Sum and things like that that Mikkeller did. This is really beautiful, actually. In terms of the mouthfeel, this one, it's quite mid-bodied. There's a nice light carbonation to it, but it's got a quite oily mouthfeel as well, and again that suits the nice sweetness of the yeast and also the kind of lemongrassy flavours in this one and the light grassy hop around the edge of the tongue. But as I said, you do get a little bit of spice from the malt base in there. That comes out a bit with the drying character of the beer too, but you get a little bit of dryness as you move into the aftertaste of this beer, and that's when you get a slightly more floral. It's not too big a floral and aromatic hit off this beer, but it does move to being a slightly drier mouthfeel in this one, pardon me, but it's really well done. The alcohol warmth is very well hidden in this as well. You only really feel it after you've taken a few sips, and it comes out down here rather than kind of tasting quite boozy. But it's the blend of flavours in this beer are absolutely beautiful. And I have to admit, if I was really into food pairing beers, as some people do, I would happily drink this with Asian food. It's perfectly designed and it's turned out beautifully. So if you're into the kind of food pairings, really try this guy with some Asian food. Or if you want to taste it on your own, it's a very, very nice beer just to have a sip of and taste. Really beautifully done. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this beer review. Overall, this is a beautiful beer that I really would recommend you try, either with Asian food or even on its own. It's just a nice beer to sit and taste. You probably could get away with even sessioning a few of these, but that said, it is 8%, so you might be in for a bit of a heavy night if you do that. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this beer review. Please let me know your own thoughts on this beer if you happen to have tried it before. Let me see those in the comment section below. Always nice to hear from you, and please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. I hope you're enjoying the kind of Dutch beer reviews that I've been doing for you over the last little while, and to my Dutch viewers, please recommend a few more Dutch breweries for me to have a look at. I've done a few and I've got some more to do for you soon. So I hope you've enjoyed this review, and I will catch you soon with the next one, and of course there will be more Dutch reviews. Slàinte!